Hello, this is going to be a short video for Lesson 5. Lesson 5 covers Chapter 22. Chapter 22 is about World War II, one of the most important events, not only in American history, but in world history. There are many things that happened during this war that are of critical importance. The first one I want to talk a little bit about is the relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union that they had during the war. Those two countries, the Soviet Union, of course, was formed after World War I as a result of the Russian Revolution. And throughout the 1920s, the United States refused to recognize the existence of that government. In 1933, Roosevelt extended diplomatic relations recognition to the Soviet Union. There was an exchange of ambassadors. There were some trade agreements that were signed. It looked like that things were kind of going in a positive direction in the early to mid 1930s. But then later in the 30s, or about second half of the 1930s, those relations turned pretty sour, largely as a result of Stalin's perpetration of the Great Purges. Another word for that would be the Great Murder, or elimination of large numbers of people in the Soviet Union. At that point, relations of the American ambassador left, and for the remainder of the 1930s, relations between the two countries were kind of in a state of suspended animation. Then in June of 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. That brought the Soviet Union, of course, into the war on the side of Great Britain. At that point, the United States extended Lend-Lease aid, military economic aid to the Soviet Union, as it already had been doing for Great Britain. And 6 months later, Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States into the war. And at that point, the United States and the Soviet Union found themselves as allies, fighting a common enemy, primarily Germany. The Soviet Union did not declare war against Japan, but at some point during the war, Stalin did promise Roosevelt that once the war in Europe was over, that the Soviet Union then would declare war against Japan and help the United States defeat Japan. That was one of the agreements that was made between them. That relationship, Great Britain, the United States, and Soviet Union, was called the Grand Alliance, and they came to a few agreements quite early in the war. One of the agreements they came to was on this Germany or Europe First strategy. The United States agreed that it would concentrate most of its resources in fighting the war in Europe, defeating Germany first. Another agreement that they had was this agreement on insisting on unconditional surrender. That was actually partly a reaction and result to what happened in World War I, when Russia had gotten out of the war and had signed a separate peace agreement with Germany. So these three, the big three, the Grand Alliance, promised not to do that in this one. They were going to fight on together until the end. That relationship was critical to all of them in many different ways. When the United States and Great Britain, France, which was Free France, or at least elements of it were, Canadians and others landed in Normandy, D-Day 1944, to open up the Second Front, they were facing approximately 30 German divisions. But since June of 1941, the Soviet Army had been facing 300 German divisions on the Eastern Front. Roosevelt recognized that the Soviets were expending tremendous amount of manpower, resources in the effort to defeat Germany, and that was critical for the United States. Despite that cooperation and despite the value that the countries placed on each other as allies during the war, there were also a lot of tensions there. One of them is the topic of the discussion for Lesson 5, the Molotov-Roosevelt talks and the idea of the Second Front. Another one actually had to do with Lend-Lease. Not all American officials agreed that Lend-Lease should be unofficial. I mean, it should be unconditional to the Soviet Union during the war, something that Roosevelt insisted on. But some told him, no, that's a mistake to do that. Should use Lend-Lease as a sort of an influence or a carrot stick approach to get the Soviets to be more compromising on certain kinds of issues, especially as the war was winding down. But Roosevelt consistently refused to do that. Nevertheless, those tensions did sow the seeds for an eventual breakdown of relations after the war that would lead the two and the world into what we call the Cold War over the next several decades, which is the topic of some future chapters. World War II was also very important for civil rights. It marked a turning point in that regard in many ways. Most people recognize that we're paying attention that Germany was fighting a racist war, a war to remake the racial map of Europe, to eliminate whole populations of people, including Jews, communists, and others, to take other populations like Slavic peoples and use them as slave labor for the next 1,000 years in the Thousand-Year Reich. That was the plan. A lot of people knew that, so fighting against that kind of a racist ideology led many people, including a lot of Americans, white Americans, black Americans, and others, to look at themselves and to think about issues of race. So there's an early formation of some attitude changes going on there. It was a big turning point for women. That's a topic of one of the assignments for Lesson 5. So there's a lot of really important, critical things that happen during the war, which makes it a major turning point in American history. Well, that's about it for now. I don't want to go on too much further. But I do want to take this opportunity to ask, solicit any kind of comments you may have on these videos. These are kind of my first experimental ones that I'm doing. I'm looking to improve them. I welcome any kind of feedback, any suggestions of any kind. You can send me a message through Blackboard, and I would definitely going to take them seriously. So I would appreciate any kind of comments that you may have about these videos. Get this one out a little earlier this week. I apologize kind of for the lateness of some of the early ones. I'm going to wish you good luck with the assignments this week, the readings and all that. And I look forward to seeing you again in the next video for Lesson 6. So have a great week. And as always, contact me with any issues, any concerns, anything at all.